She was like a black widow. Everywhere she went, it was always a scam, always an angle.
Sante and Kenneth Kimes, aka Mommy and Clyde. A mother and son duo of con artists, arsonists and fraudsters with crimes that stretched from Los Angeles to the Bahamas. Together they were convicted of 118 crimes, including 2 murders.
They thought they were untouchable. They thought they were smarter than everyone else.
Hi, I'm Nick from True Crime Uncut. Welcome to Questions With. This week we're speaking with retired NYPD Detective Tom Hovagim about his work on the Kimes case. How did this case begin?
The night Irene Silverman went missing was a quiet night in Manhattan. It was July 5th. It was a Sunday night. On the weekends, Manhattan empties out. People go to their vacation homes out of the city. So it was very quiet. So we didn't expect anything in the detective squad to really come in that night. Phone rang. I picked it up. And I had a patrol officer on the other end start to tell me about a woman, an elderly woman who is missing. I asked him some preliminary questions. How old was she, mentally stable? And he assured me that, according to her staff, she would not have wandered off. She had all her wits about her. She had just hosted a party the night before on July 4th for her staff and her friends. Once the officer said that the staff was pretty insistent that she would never leave the townhouse, and she had difficulty walking, and if she did leave, she wouldn't leave by herself. So then it started to raise my suspicion a little bit more than the average missing person call. So I go over there with one of my partners to the property. It's only 2 blocks away. I'm met by the patrol officers, and I start interviewing staff members of hers who reiterated that she's been gone all day, no one has talked to her. And then we just started doing what we normally would do for a missing elderly person. We would search the townhouse from the basement to the roof, the adjoining buildings. We canvassed for video, any witnesses in the stores, because it was right off Madison Avenue. And we took it from there.
Who was Irene Silverman?
So Irene Silverman was a former ballerina in her younger days, and she danced at Radio City Music Hall. She liked to host parties. As a matter of fact, on July 4th, she was dressed in red, white, and blue. She gave flags out to everyone. She loved to do a theme for her parties, from what I was told by her staff. And she lived on the townhouse. She was retired. Irene Silverman's townhouse was beautiful. All her embroidery work, a lot of it was hanging on the walls. It was beautifully furnished, marble, staircases, foyer, clean. She had 10 apartments that she rented, $6,000 a week rooms to out-of-towners that were wealthy. And she was the caretaker of the townhouse. Irene Silverman had a really nice life up until her disappearance. Eventually, we spoke to some of her friends. Irene Silverman, as a person, was what they would call a tough old broad in street language. She was a no-nonsense woman. She was firm with her staff, but friendly and respectful. But she did rule with an iron fist, but she was a gentle woman at the same time. She knew that without the townhouse and employing her staff, that the staff would be left out in the cold. She cared very much about the staff, and she would never put their jobs in jeopardy. As the night grew, it just definitely, we knew it was uncharacteristic of her to just leave. We knew something was going on.
How did you learn about a suspicious tenant?
Irene's staff informed us that Irene always was suspicious of this guy who was the one who rented the apartment 1B from her. He gave her the name of Manny Guerin. She said he looks like jail. All the staff were suspicious of him, but Irene the most. She had a very good street sense about her, and she knew something was not right with this guy. He was very suspicious with his behavior. He avoided the cameras that were in the lobby. He would hug the wall. There were several times where Mrs. Silverman saw him standing at the door looking through his peephole. She would see his feet. And he also had a female in the apartment, and she would always hide from the camera also. So there was suspicious behavior that she picked up on right away, and she made it known to her staff that she did not like the guy that was staying in apartment 1B. The staff informed us that Manny Guerin also disappeared. And he was not due to check out of that apartment yet. He still had rent that was paid up.
How did you find out who Manny Guerin and the woman seen in his apartment really were?
There was a news conference that the Inspector Resnick, who was running the investigation, had on TV that we were looking for Irene Silverman. At that point, she was still a missing person. However, a detective that was working for the Joint Terrorist Task Force, which is a different unit that works with the feds, was at home and heard the news conference early in the morning, and he heard the name Irene Silverman. He realized that 2 days prior, he had taken in a mother and son who was later identified as Sante and Kenneth Kimes into custody for an unrelated reason than Mrs. Silverman. Sante and Kenny used a bad check that had bounced to buy a Lincoln out west at a dealership. So a warrant was issued for their arrest. That was the initial contact they had in New York City. They were being arrested for a bounce check, a forged check. When they arrested Sante and Kenny, they had her ID, social security card, and all kinds of business papers with Irene Silverman's name on them. So then they immediately called up and said, hey, I think we have a couple of people here you might want to speak to. When the police moved in on Kenny and Sante Kimes, when they got to Kenny and they put the cuffs on him, he wet himself. He peed his pants. They both later found out that they were being arrested for the bad check on the car, and that was a big relief to them. But little did they know we were also investigating them for Irene Silverman, who is missing. After Kenny was arrested, he was put in a lineup, and we brought the staff down to the lineup, and they identified Kenny Kimes as being Manny Guerin from apartment 1B at the townhouse. Then we obtained a search warrant for the apartment 1B to do a thorough search to collect evidence. When we went in, we found a shower curtain box with just showerings. The actual curtain was missing. We found duct tape. We found a large amount of women's clothes. We found several wigs for women, one with red hair. We also found a drug that is used they call it the date rape drug. It's used to knock people out. We also found papers with Irene Silverman's signature written several times, like someone was practicing her signature. Also in the apartment, we found a to-do list written by Sante Kimes. It had groceries, orange juice, whatever else, but it also had duct tape, rope, garbage bags, duffel bag. We have an elderly woman missing that would never have walked off the property. We have a man that was in an apartment that's also not where he's supposed to be. And this was 2 days later, and he still hasn't come back to retrieve his things. So the suspicion was really pretty high at that point, that there was foul play. We were hoping Irene was still alive, but we had our doubts at that point. After we put the case together, and Manny Guerin was actually Kenny Kimes and Sante Kimes, we obtained a search warrant for their Lincoln Town car that they drove cross-country in. When we did a search warrant with that car, it was funny because when we opened the trunk, there was hardly anything in the trunk. Everything was piled in the back seat. So we were in a garage underground with the crime scene unit and myself and my partner. And we went through that car meticulously, laying everything out on sheets and went through all its contents. Inside the car, we found a .22 caliber handgun. We found a stun gun box. We found 15 notebooks that were later pretty much the reason why they were convicted, because inside those notebooks, Sante made meticulous notes of the staff's movements, who the staff were. She had names, all kinds of daily notes on the staff and the goings-on in the townhouse. Then we knew that this was more than just a missing person.
How did Kenny Kimes behave during questioning?
When my partner and I went down to interview Kenneth Kimes after he was arrested, we started to talk to him, and he was very pleasant. He wouldn't say anything. He said, I have no comment, I have no comment, I have no comment. He kept talking about that. And then I was talking about poor Irene and her missing and how her staff misses her. And I was trying to play on his emotions, trying to get him to feel sorry for her. At one point, I thought I had him. He started to tear up. He started to slouch. And I thought, this is it. He's going to go. He's going to spill. Then all of a sudden, in snap of a finger, he became stone cold. Rigid, sat up, stone cold, and said, I have no comment, and just looked at us. I tried again. He just didn't even say anything. That was it. He was done.
What was Sante and Kenny's motive?
In one of Sante Kimes' court appearances, she scribbled on a piece of paper, plaza with a number next to it. That baffled us. We didn't know what that was, but we knew it was something. So at that point, we started calling hotels. Someone thought it was a bag check, and they were right. I don't know which detective thought of it, but it came to be that number was a bag check. We called the Plaza Hotel, being the word plaza was there, but they didn't have any information for us. They said, no, we don't have anything with that number on it. Later, we received a phone call from the director of security at the Plaza Hotel, who happens to be a retired NYPD officer. He said that someone had just come in and removed a bag that we think you might be interested in the Sante and Kenneth Kimes case. We immediately dispatched officers over there to go see who this guy was. They only had a name. The name we later got that same day was a private investigator. We tracked him down, and we recovered the bag. And it's a good thing we did, because inside that bag was the forged deed to Irene Silverman's townhouse. It was a huge piece of evidence. So without that bag, the motive would have been still sitting out there. Sante knew that bag was crucial, and she didn't want anyone to find that bag. So she must have told her lawyers, hey, there's a bag at the plaza, you guys need to go get that bag. And that's why they hired a private investigator. And that's what really was that was motive. Their main objective was to steal the townhouse from Irene Silverman and transfer the deed to their name.
How did Sante and Kenny sign the townhouse over to themselves?
While Kenny was staying there, they obtained Irene Silverman's signature from a rent receipt that Kenny got when he paid her cash. From there, they traced her name to get her signature. And they also Kenny also went into her office and snooped around and found, I believe, her social security card and other documents for the townhouse. They had to get several papers notarized. There was a couple of red-headed wigs that Sante Kimes had used to dress as Irene Silverman for the notary when they came in to sign the papers. They met a notary at a hotel in the neighborhood, and he knew something was not right about the business deal, so he removed himself and left. Then there was another one that came into the townhouse, went into a dimly lit bedroom in apartment 1B, and saw an old woman in the bed, and that particular notary didn't feel right about that either, about the business. She felt something was suspicious, so she left. Then they got a third notary, who went in, and it was the same circumstances. The lights were dim. There was a woman in bed, claimed she was sick, but she did follow through and notarize the papers that they wanted notarized.
What do you think they did with Irene Silverman's body?
We looked for Irene's body for several days. We started with searching dumpsters in the neighborhood where people threw out garbage. We contacted sanitation companies to find out where they dumped the garbage on that day, what time they collected the garbage on that day. Police officers were sent out to dumps in Pennsylvania and actually raked through garbage looking for clues. I myself did a run from the townhouse out to Secaucus, New Jersey, through the Lincoln Tunnel, which we suspected is the route he took to dump her body out in the Meadowlands. In addition to that, I went up in a helicopter on 2 occasions with heat-seeking equipment and flew over the Meadowlands looking for any sign of a body that might have been dumped out there. I think Kenny Kimes did drive her out to Jersey and put her in a dumpster. And she is probably somewhere in a landfill right now, one that we didn't know about. And I hope one day we find her.
While the NYPD were unsuccessful in locating Irene Silverman's body, they soon became aware that Sante and Kenny Kimes had an extensive criminal background, including at least one other murder. What did you learn about their prior crimes?
Sante Kimes was some character. Several years prior to this crime that Sante committed along with Kenny, She was involved in other things that were criminal. She was arrested for slavery. She would keep women in her home and use them as servants, not letting them out of the house and also not paying them. Finally, one of the young women escaped, and subsequent to that, Sante was arrested, and she did get sentenced and went to jail for that. At that point, what's interesting was Kenny went to go live with a family of an LA police officer. And I think he was in junior high at the time. And he was doing really well. They said he was very engaged with his classmates. He had friends. He was actually doing very well for the first time in his life, independent. When Sante came out of jail, she went right back and took her son back. And that's when the manipulation started. And she brought him into her world. As the investigation unfolded, we contacted the LAPD, who initially put out the warrant for the stolen car that they drove cross-country in to New York City. So once we talked to them, they informed us that they were investigating the Kimeses for a homicide that occurred out in LA earlier. The victim's name was David Kasdan, who was found in a dumpster near LAX airport in Los Angeles. So we knew that they were wanted.
How did Sante and Kenny Kimes act during the trial?
Their behavior in the trial was one of surprise. When the prosecutors were presenting the case, there was a lot of head shaking, a lot of eye rolling, a lot of notes that she was taking down during the trial. She kept writing. I don't know what she was writing. Whispering to the attorneys, shaking her head, just things like that. She was more animated than Kenny. Kenny kind of sat there. There was some animation, but not like Sante. She played it very well. While they were in the courtroom, the judge had to tell Kenny and Sante Kimes to stop holding hands. They were unbelievably close in a very odd way for a mother and son. We had a homicide without a body and all circumstantial evidence, but that circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The notes, the note we found in the apartment, the shopping list, the to-do list, major piece of evidence. The deed to the townhouse gave us motive. We had everything we needed. We just didn't have the body. I think we were all a bit nervous, but we knew we'd get a conviction. I mean, if you sat on a jury and listened to the presentation from the district attorney's office, without a doubt, these two people killed Irene Silverman. Sante was so over the top dramatic in pleading her innocence, it was ridiculous. She went on 60 Minutes. She went on another news show and proclaimed her innocence, and it was so over the top. It just was ridiculous, in my opinion. She was not convincing at all. She tried to be, crying, carrying on, waving her arms, and professing her love for her son, and we would never do this, as God as my witness, she used to say. That was a great saying of Sante's. As God as my witness, we would never do anything like that. Why would we murder a sweet old woman? Oh my God, my son would never do that. Things like that. But it was transparent. She was very transparent to me. This case set precedence. We got a conviction for a homicide without a body. I was ecstatic. The only downside is that we never found Irene. I still feel bad about that to this day. But it was a great feeling. The district attorney's office did an unbelievable job, along with the New York City Police Department. What a great combined effort to convict these two stone-cold killers.
How do you remember this case?
Sante Kimes. She is the evil one. Kenny probably would have had a good life if he got away from her. She manipulated him his whole life and transformed him into a really evil person like her. She was like a black widow. Everywhere she went, it was always a scam, always an angle. And he became that way too. But then, it's a progression with crime. You start with these small crimes, and then you graduate to homicide. And that's exactly what happened to them. They thought they were untouchable. They thought they were smarter than everyone else, especially Sante. She thought she was smarter than everyone else. And she got to the level where she was okay with homicide. I mean, she really killed two people. Kenny physically did it, but she gave the orders. Make no mistake about it, it was her. This is a case that most detectives dream about getting. It's so involved and so crazy and outrageous, and there's so many avenues to go down. It's a once-in-a-lifetime case. It definitely was the case of the century as far as I'm concerned for New York City.
For the murder of Irene Silverman, Sante and Kenny were sentenced to 120 and 125 years respectively. Then in 2004, Sante and Kenny were both sentenced to life in prison for the murder of David Kasdan. On May the 19th, 2014, Sante Kimes died in prison. She was 79 years old. Her son Kenny remains in prison at Richard J. Donovan Correctional Facility. We hope you were intrigued by this interview about the shocking crimes of Sante and Kenny Kimes. For more content like this, drop a thumbs up below and hit that subscribe button. Make sure to tell us in the comments which killer you'd like to see next. I'm Nick from True Crime Uncut. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.